Hi, everybody. Presenting my honors thesis for the Party School, Female White Supremacist Influencers and the Mainstreaming of Replacement Theory. My project was advised by Professor Woodward of the Party School. So I'm going to begin with a quick introduction of female white supremacist influencers. I will refer to them as FWSI, and then I'll go over my methods and detail my findings and why they matter. So my thesis examines the narratives that female white supremacist influencers are using in their YouTube videos and how their messaging contributes to the mainstreaming of white supremacist ideas. The three YouTube channels that I examined are those of Ayla Stewart, Brittany Sellner, and Rebecca Hargraves. All three of these women were born in the US, and they range in age from 29 to 42. They also vary in education level. Ayla Stewart has a master's degree in women's spirituality. Hargraves has a degree from the University of Missouri, and Sellner has a high school education. So to find out what narratives they are using, I turn to their YouTube channels. I downloaded the transcripts of the 10 most popular videos with a runtime of over 10 minutes from each YouTube channel and analyzed the videos for 14 common white supremacist narratives. I decided on these categories after watching some trial videos to get an idea of what they were talking about, and I also referred to a research brief from the National Consortium for the Study of Terrorism and Responses to Terrorism, which gave an overview of key concepts in white supremacy. I found an average of 160 total instances in Ayla Stewart's videos in which she used white supremacist narratives. She most frequently used anti-immigrant, white genocide, and white power narratives. Those are in the black edged text boxes there. Brittany Sellner used an average of 73.5 white supremacist narratives, the largest share of those being anti-immigrant statements or arguments that people of color are criminals, rapists, or uncivilized. It's notable that she has the most subscribers and also the least explicit references to white genocide. And for Hargraves, I found 59 uses of white supremacist narratives, and with the largest being the same as Sellner with anti-immigrant, white genocide, and white power. So I noticed that the primary narratives used by the FWSI were all associated with the tenets of replacement theory, which is a conspiracy theory popularized by the French philosopher Renaud Camus, who published this 2011 book, The Great Replacement, detailing these ideas. He describes an intentional conspiracy by racial minorities or non-white immigrants to replace native white Europeans in their countries. And he described higher birth rates among women of color to be demographic warfare, and believes that higher birth rates and migration to Europe and the US by people of color amounts to genocide of the white race. So for the narratives that these women are using, anti-immigrant rhetoric, which is one of the most commonly used by all three, is central to replacement theory because promoters of replacement theory, like these FWSI, believe that immigrants are part of the larger scheme of white genocide. They believe that they must promote and defend white culture because one of the steps of genocide is mocking the culture and faith, specifically in this case of white people. And so some specific narrative trends within the realm of the white power arguments they're using, arguing that white culture does exist, defending America as inherently white and Christian, and opposing white guilt for things like slavery and colonialism. And finally, arguing that people of color are criminals, rapists, and uncivilized gives FWSI an excuse or justification for anti-immigrant policies that they believe are necessary to stop the Great Replacement. Replacement theory is inherently misogynistic, so you might wonder why women are promoting a viewpoint that pretty much reduces them to a walking womb. Female white supremacists use femininity, motherhood, and marriage as framing devices to conjure a defense of white supremacy. They present white people as under attack and position white supremacy as the only way to protect the existence of the white race. Replacement theory is a particularly useful narrative tool for FWSI or women because it empowers women as the solution to the problem. If birth rates are low, it's up to white women to have more children and stop the Great Replacement. They also use traditional gender roles and femininity to reframe white supremacy and make it more appealing. They use coded arguments rather than expressing their hatred explicitly. They might frame their anti-immigrant stance as a security concern. It's much more tasteful to argue for protecting women from migrant rapists than it is to explicitly argue for a white ethno-state. And furthermore, the use of YouTube by FWSI to highlight a perceived threat to the white race is inspiring and inciting violence. In the last decade, there have been at least 5 major instances of mass violence perpetrated by white men who wrote manifestos citing the Great Replacement. And FWSI might even post a call to action. So they highlight this threat, and then men answer the call, which might be described as a battle call. Finally, right-wing politicians have recently proposed a slew of bills seeking to limit the discussion of race or gender in schools. And this type of legislation seeks to prevent one step of white genocide that I mentioned from Ayla Stewart earlier, which is mocking white culture to dehumanize white people. This legislation institutionalizes the concept of white power. So instead of focusing on the misogynism of replacement theory, we need to focus on how women can exploit the perceived problem of white genocide and possible solutions to empower themselves and expand their influence without raising any alarm bells. We can't afford to underestimate women or dismiss them as passive participants. Their influence on social media poses a very serious threat to our public safety. Thank you.
I was just curious, when you classify these women as influencers, does that also mean they get like sponsorship deals or they do collaborations with businesses?
So they're not really, because they can't really get anyone to collaborate with them. They do collaborate with each other, so there is a strong network of right-wing and alt-right influencers on YouTube who they engage in influencer behavior, so they might use similar styles on their videos as influencers that you might think of more traditionally. And they do try to make money off their YouTube channels, so they do monetize their videos, and they may limit the discussions that they have in an attempt to make sure that their videos don't get like demonetized or taken down.
Thank you.
So Brittany Sellner, that's the spouse of Martin Sellner, right?
Yes.
So how has his activism in the identitarian movement in Europe kind of influenced, or if you've noticed this over time, changed the way she's talked about a lot of these white identity politics? Because she was like a big influencer before marrying him, right?
Yes. Yeah, so you can see, so I did their most popular videos, and those span a wide time range. So some of them are from before her marriage and some are from after. And before, she does a lot more content with her twin sister where they talk about more gender issues, so dating, marriage, children. And then after, she's much more explicitly political, especially after her husband's visa was revoked, because once he got banned from the United States, she got a lot more political, talking about issues in South Africa, in Austria, in Germany. So she's definitely gotten more traditionally political and moved away from gender issues since marrying him.
I was curious, when you talked about this, you're finding parallels between the Great Replacement Theory and these transcripts of these videos. Did you rely on close reading of these texts, or did you also rely on a quantitative coding of Camus' writings and compare them with through, I don't know, word frequencies or phrase frequencies? Was it a quantitative work that made that comparison? Or?
Not comparing them, no. His book has not been translated into English, and I cannot read French, so that wasn't possible, but it's definitely something, I would love to look into the future.
Thank you for this. Can I ask about sort of the performance that these women give in their videos? Like, what kind of tone do they strike, or what do they say to their viewers to try to sort of bring them into this ideology?
They definitely make it very intimate. All their videos are just them and the camera, so they're just talking directly to you, and they try to make people feel like they're part of the family. More than, I would say at least half of the videos I looked at were live streams where they respond to comments that are coming in as people are watching the videos. So they really try to foster a connection where you feel like you're part of the conversation with them. So it's that very intimate style where they're really trying to bring you in that way. And they also make references to things that are going on. So current events, or they'll reference news articles that might have, provoked a lot of outrage in the community. Things that they can try to, bring people in on and find points of connection. Thanks.